Welcome everyone to
this episode of the Think and Reform podcast. My name is Luke Sank. Thank you everyone for listening. This podcast is brought to you by futureofchristendom.org. If you go to Future of Christendom, you'll see our website, which has a list of upcoming events. I want to talk about one. May 17th here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We're going to be having a symposium on Lancastrian theonomy or non-legislative theonomy. And want to invite everyone out for that all-day event. Registration is $5. And we'll have some great speakers. We'll have some great fellowship. And we'll have a good time of teaching and learning and discourse on the law of God and how it applies to our culture and society today. This event is put on by Future of Christendom. I'll be there. My dad will be there. Joel Saint, Chris Hume will be there. And Matt Kennitzer. We'll have a couple other speakers there as well. Andrew Horvath and Henry Karish. And it's going to be a really great time. Hope to see everyone there. Looking forward to meeting some new people and seeing some friends that I made on Facebook and fellowshipping with those gentlemen. So that's our upcoming event. We also have an event coming up in October. It's going to be our annual Future of Christendom conference, but we'll have more information on that later. So just make sure to keep October clear in your schedules and look for announcements, further announcements regarding that event. Today, I want to talk about the common state of Christian nationalism as it is appearing right now. The things that they were saying and how, like the boat that a lot of Christian nationalists got on and where the boat's at now. And there seems to be this push in Christian nationalism. In my opinion, the bizarre thing about Christian nationalism is they don't seem to be as concerned about where they're going. There's not much regard for like the direction we're going. It's more regard from getting away from where we're at now, right? Like boats on the water, and the leaders aren't going, okay, let's plot out a direction that we're going. The leaders seem to be saying, let's just get away from the shore. And I think very few people are asking, well, where are we going? And the boat of Christian nationalism just seems focused on, let's just get away from the shore. We'll figure out the rest later, but let's just get away from the shore. And this seems to be coming in this whole, and I use the whole bizarre push, the bizarre emphasis, focus, attention on immigration. It's just it's so weird. It's so weird. This is their thing. This is like, are you a Christian nationalist? Yes. Okay. Well then, you must be all about immigration. The Christian nationalists like, yeah, I'm all about immigration. Like we got to get the immigrants out of here. That's our thing. If Christian nationalism loses its push and focus on getting all the immigrants out, then I don't really know what it is, really. They say they want a Christian nation. That's kind of changing. That's kind of going by the wayside. We're just focusing towards, they're kind of careening towards just nationalism in general. And it just seems to me that they just keep on picking these battles that are just so weird and bizarre. And this main battle, like the field of war, their pitched battle that they've chosen is like immigration. Their focus is if we don't get the immigrants out of here, then what's this all about? They keep tying the future of America to who's in here, the physical people who are in here. And like the future of America is dependent upon, what kind of people we have in here, not talking about the character and the morality of these people. No, I'm talking about physical people. Like if we have people from a different country in this nation, we'll never survive as a nation. And we got to get them all out. And instead of focusing on, let's develop a godly and Christian and righteous generation in this nation, they're really focused on, let's get rid of all the bad people, which seem to be immigrants. I don't know. They for some reason, the Christian nationalists think the immigrants are worse than your typical public school grad, which I don't agree with at all. I think the public school grad is just as bad as the immigrants. I mean, I keep saying this. The immigrants who come here, they know what a man and a woman is, but your typical public school grad doesn't. and they keep on trying to protect the white culture, and it's all, you gotta accept, my people and all that kind of stuff, and it's good to see pushback, and it's good to see white people not being embarrassed about their whiteness. That's refreshing, and it's good to see the white people, being unashamed about, like, yes, I like hanging around white people more than I like hanging around whatever other demographic you want to put in there. That's fine. That's refreshing to see. But the direction they're going with this is like, we need to make this a law now. Like, we need to get the state involved with this ethnic identity thing, and we need to get the state involved and start passing legislation and give the state more power. We need to give up our freedoms as quickly as we can, so we can get, we need to increase the police state so that we can get rid of all these brown people or what have you. It's really weird. And I want to bring up 3 examples of this, of what I believe to be the short-sightedness and the foolishness of Christian nationalism and its leaders. And I want to start off with a tweet here this is a Facebook post I'm looking at here by Brian Solveig. And this is in reaction to, I think, Trump passing out cash payments for babies, like incentivizing having children. And the Christian nationalism focus, for some reason, they don't really care about abortion. It's like not their thing. They don't really talk about it. It's not their thing. Brian Solveig's quote here. I mean, they talk about it sometimes. I mean, they give it the lip service, but they're not talking about legislation to get rid of it. They celebrate Trump sending troops to the border, but they're not really pushing for Trump to send troops to Planned Parenthood to shut it down. They think that people coming into this country that are not from this country is worse than the white people killing off their children, because we are killing off our children, and that's why we have an immigration problem, is because the white people keep killing their babies and the immigrants aren't. So Brian Solveig says this, and I believe this is in response to Trump's Cash for Babies incentive program, or whatever he's doing, whatever weird thing he's doing. And just a quick word on Trump. It's really going great. Hey, everyone's happy with his Zionism, and Christian nationalists are just tickled pink. We knew what time it was, right? Everyone get on board. It's Trump time. We know what time it was, and now nobody knows what he's doing. Nobody knows what he's up to. Tariff on, tariff off. I choose you. Tariff on China. Okay, never mind on that. And he's doing all those weird things, and nobody knows really what he's doing. Everyone seems to be kind of like disappointed in Trump, and there's still the diehard faithful fans who are like, the 4D chess is in there somewhere and all that kind of stuff. But everyone seems to be really disappointed in criticizing Trump. But hey, we all knew what time it was. It was all worth it. So sacrifice your principles and your morals, because, we just need to get on board here because we know what time it is. It was all worth it. So this is from Brian Solveig. We need mass deportations and border security, not cash payments for having a baby. Cash payments for babies will have a marginal impact on birth rates and massive impacts on fraud committed by third world immigrants. If we don't have the spine to do the deportations, there is no reason to think that we can prevent fraudulent abuse of fertility payments by immigrant communities. I just don't think, personally speaking, with respect to Mr. Solveig, I just don't think that a biblically informed mind on the primacy of sin and the hierarchy of what horrible sins are, the sins that will destroy a nation, and the sins, how to prioritize, what are the really bad sins and what are the sins that the state's not meant to fight, and what are the sins that the state is meant to fight, and these kinds of things, these sins and crimes. I don't think a biblically informed mind is going to, when they hear that the state is handing out cash payments, get frustrated that the state's handing out cash payments and not deporting people. I think a biblically informed mind would be indignant that the state is funding baby murder, that the state allows baby murder, and at the same time is trying to give cash payments for having children, but at the same time does not outlaw baby murder. It seems to me that Brian here is got his priorities way mixed up, way wrong. Like you look at the state handing out cash payments for having children, and your first thought is we need to get rid of the immigrants. That's your go-to. Oh, the state's handing out cash payment for babies? That's ridiculous. We need to get rid of the immigrants. What? That's silly. Your first thought should be, wait, we're killing our babies. We allow it, we fund it, we celebrate it in our culture, and the state's handing out cash payment for having babies and funding child murder and child sacrifice? That should be your first thought. But no, his go-to is, on responding to cash payments, his go-to is we need mass deportations instead. What? I just have a question. I mean, what's on your mind, dude? What's on your mind? If you hear about the state handing out cash payments, you're like, and your first thought is we need to get rid of the immigrants. I say you don't have a biblically informed mind. You're not thinking about God's law. You're thinking about you're concerned that the road to peace and prosperity is through injustice, and that's Christian nationalism right now. The road to peace and prosperity is through injustice. We've got to commit injustice to get peace and prosperity. We've got to oppress people who aren't doing anything wrong. We got to surrender our freedoms to the state so that they can punish people who aren't doing anything wrong. And just kick them out, and they won't come back in. And that's ever worked. That's how we got rid of guns and drugs. Nobody has guns and drugs in America because we made it illegal, and we watched the border for them. But the Christian nationalism is all their emphasis lately has been on we need to commit injustice to the people here so that we can have peace and prosperity. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think that the Christian nationalism, if we did, punish immigrants or deport them or whatever, that doesn't mean that every single immigrant here is innocent. I'm not saying that. What the immigrants need, just like the citizens here, is justice. That's what they need. They need justice, right? They need God's justice positively, and they need God's justice negatively. That's the answer to the problems. Justice. That's how we have peace. We have peace through justice. God's law is the only system and the only law that can provide this. And the Christian nationalists are like, forget about God's law. Let's do injustice so that we can have peace. That's their emphasis. It's really bizarre. Here's Brian Sauvé calling for mass deportations. Brilliant idea, Brian. Let's do mass deportations. Let's oppress let's throw in the innocent along with the guilty and oppress both, and then God will really bless us then once we only have all the white people in here. And these guys complain about globalism. Is it not the white people the worst perpetrators of globalism? It's not the brown people pushing globalism. It's the white people pushing globalism. And you want to get rid of the brown people. It's just so weird. Their hierarchy of their priorities is just so bizarre. We just need to get rid of all the immigrants, and then we'll be able to solve all the problems here. And then we need to focus on the other problems, which aren't as important as the immigrants. It's so weird. This Christian nationalism is just looking less and less Christian every single day. Now, I want to move to Joel Webbin, who's always good for something statist. So let's. The title of this video is "First Generation Immigrants Can Never Be True Americans." Now, this is Right Response Ministries wording this video. First generations immigrants can never be true Americans. Never. Okay? So let's listen to what Mr. Webbin has to say about this.
In the chat, because my heart goes out to you, and there are many people in this same similar situation as you. I have people in our church that fit this description, and I want you to know that I love you. I am glad you're here, and I want to deal with our listeners, our followers, with honesty and integrity. I feel like a lot of pastors will use they'll just gloss over things, and so I want to deal with this honestly. So Ninja 5150 says this: Joel, I know I'm probably the exception, but I'm a first-generation immigrant from Mexico, and I am as patriotic as they come. My two sons, born in the USA, served our country honorably, and we love the USA. So Ninja 5150, first, I'm assuming you're listening to this because you're a Christian. So first, you're my brother in Christ. I love you immensely. Number two, from the little bit that I can tell from this comment, you're the type of person that I can genuinely say from the bottom of my heart, I'm glad you're here. I'm grateful for your sons and their service. And so here's my position. If I had my way, you would be here, but you would not be a citizen. Your sons would not be citizens. Your grandchildren would. And you would be treated fairly as just like the general equity, the application of the civil codes to Israel. The sojourner should not be oppressed or extorted or taken advantage of. You would be treated fairly. You would be able to have fair wages. There would be less people that are able to fit into this category, less legal immigration on the whole, year by year, substantially less. But people like you, Ninja 5150, there would be cases exactly like you, and you would always be my brother in Christ, whether you immigrated here or not, simply by our union with Christ by the Spirit and through faith. You furthermore would be not my fellow citizen, but in a looser sense, a fellow countryman who lives here. You would be my neighbor, and my particular neighbor in a geographic, literal sense, living in my country. I would care for you, your wife, your children, your grandchildren, and want to see your best. And yet there would still be multiple categories and not just a one-size-fits-all. You would be a part of our country, but you would be a sojourner, but a sojourner who, like Ruth, wants to bind herself to Israel. Your God will be my God, your people will be my people, and your grandchildren would eventually be citizens and voting in our national elections and all these kinds of things. You yourself would not be able to achieve in your lifetime, for yourself personally, that level of assimilation. But you would be loved, you would be appreciated, there would be no animosity towards you, you would be treated with fairness, and you and other Christians like you who immigrated, it would be less amount, for sure. Millions have to go back. They have to go back. But some would be permitted to come, and we would be grateful that you were here, and you would be loved. That's my position. I currently pastor a church where we have two families that are from Canada. The same would apply for them. They know this. And they've heard my preaching as it's come up in sermons, because we preach all the way through the book of Ezra and the book of Joshua, and these kinds of topics come up. And they know my position. They listen to the podcast. They know that they are, first and foremost, my brothers and sisters in Christ and deeply loved. Secondly, they're also my neighbors at a national level, my national neighbors, because they live here. They are residents of these United States of America. I care for their well-being. I care for their marriage, their children, all these things at a pastoral level first, spiritually, but then at a national level because they are fellow residents. But they know my position and they agree with it. That's the thing. They agree with it. They get it. They get that nations matter. My position is that they would not be able to be full citizens and would not be able to vote in our elections, but that their grandchildren would. And that it would take time to fully assimilate. In the meantime, though, they would be loved. They would be cherished. They are loved. They are cherished, first at a spiritual level as brothers and sisters in Christ. Secondly, at a national level as residents, fellow residents, but not yet citizens. Now, I'm not king of America. In God's providence, in his infinite wisdom, he's seen that not be the case. I'm sure he made the right call. And so I don't make the rules. So because that's not currently the law in America, I advocate that they pursue citizenship. Right. That they actually do attain citizenship, because that's the law of the land, and I'd much rather them be citizens than a bunch of other people who don't love Jesus, don't love America, and are just trying to exploit it for as an economic zone. And so to those families in our church, this general equity of the Old Testament and the third generation, that's not the law of the land. So pursue citizenship, and I am praying that you get it.
Mm-hmm. So I'll just pause it right here for a second. A couple things. He's appealing to the idea of the third generation third generation being of some foreigners being allowed into the assembly of Israel. Let me just look this up here. Okay, so Deuteronomy 23 here. So you have different categories that God lays out, and some of the categories, some people aren't allowed into the 10th. Some are never allowed in. Some are allowed in after the third generation, and then there's entire nations that are not listed in this ban on being allowed into assembly of the Lord. Christian nationalism doesn't know what to do with the consistent application of the assembly of the Lord. They don't know what to do with it, because I mean, there's some that are 10, some that are never, and some that are 3 generations. And his designation, I'm sure he's got a reason for it, but I don't think that when put under the microscope, anyone can consistently make a case that a nation can stop someone from being a citizen. If we had God's law as a standard, you can't stop someone from becoming a citizen until the third generation. There's no law that allows you to do that. So this is at Deuteronomy 23. No one whose testicles are crushed or whose male organ is cut off shall enter the assembly of the Lord. So if we're going to be consistent, we've got to ban those people, right? We've got to ban people whose testicles are crushed and whose male organ is cut off. And then people coming in, we've got to check them. We got to check them, right? When we vet everybody and we don't allow people in, and we're doing our vetting process, and when the state is in control, which is a brilliant idea, Christian nationalists, let's put the state in control of defining who's a Christian and who's not. We've got to apply this consistently. We've got to check their testicles, right? Because there it says. And if you say to me, well, that's ceremonial, then the rest of it's ceremonial too, right? That part is fulfilled in Christ. So you can't, if you're going to be consistent, you've got to say, okay, if you're from a different nation, all right, you can't become a citizen until the third generation. And if you have your male organ cut off and your testicles are crushed, you're not allowed in here. Sorry. So number 2, no one born of a forbidden union may enter the assembly of the Lord. We've got to do background checks and say, hey, were you born of a forbidden union? Even to the 10th generation, none of his descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord. No Ammonite or Moabite may enter the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation, none of them may enter the assembly of the Lord forever, because they did not meet with you bread and water on the way, right? All that kind of stuff. For the Lord your God will not listen to the Balaam. Okay, you shall not abhor an Edomite, for he is your brother. You shall not abhor an Egyptian, because you are a sojourner in his land. Children born to them in the third generation may enter the assembly of the Lord. Okay, and so that's right there. That's the law that I believe Joel Webben is appealing to. Children born to them in the third generation may enter the assembly of the Lord. Okay, that's Egypt and Edom. What about Assyria? What about Syria? Right? What about? There's a lot more nations that the Israelites interacted with. This is not a comprehensive list of all the nations that Israel ever interacted with. There are many other nations. There are many other nations that are not listed here, right? So what about those nations? Are they in with the Ammonites or the Moabites, or are they with the Edomites and the Egyptians? What do we do with them? So, how do we know that the immigrant who's coming in is someone who should be banned completely, or someone who's allowed in, but he can't become a citizen until the third generation? The designation is arbitrary. God is the only one who's able to make this designation. We cannot apply this today because we don't know how to correctly categorize. There are people in this nation who are Americans who are worse than the Moabites and the Ammonites. Do we deport them? Is that the proper punishment for people who are who are like the Ammonites or Moabites and did the same thing? Is that it? Like we bring them before a judge and say, okay, your punishment is deportation. Is that a just punishment? Christian nationalism doesn't know what to do with this. There's no consistent application to citizenship. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is, what does it mean to be a citizen in a nation? Now, Joel Webben didn't give a comprehensive list of this is what I believe a citizen is. But what is your fear of somebody coming to this nation becoming a citizen on the first day? Well, the fear is that he's going to vote and he's going to interfere with the politics, right? When you establish a governmental system that allows it to be taken over by people who are wicked and can influence the lawmaking abilities of that nation, you've created a godless system. God's system is not afraid of immigration because the immigrants can't change the law. For 400 years, Israel experienced unmatched prosperity because their system did not allow the immigrants to take over. The only time that they went into they were given over to the enemies is because they committed idolatry, not because they didn't have a good immigration program, not because they didn't have a big wall. It wasn't like, the Ammonites got close and then they just started living among them, and then they took over the culture, and then they elected the leaders, and then suddenly Israel was gone because their political system was voted out by the immigrants. And no, they were given over because they were idolatrous. But then they had a revival, right? The Book of Judges has experienced 7 revivals and over 200 years of peace, something that America can't even come close to. As I say often on this, sorry if I sound like a broken record. But citizenship, or the assembly, was not a law-making assembly. If someone entered the assembly, it wasn't like they suddenly had power to change the law. There was no body to change God's law. So if you entered the assembly, it didn't really make a difference on the laws of the land. But the Christian nationalism as it's manifesting itself today, is arguing for a system that is so politically weak that if we get the wrong people in this nation, whether they're from out there or in here, Harvard law professor just as American as you and I, or a immigrant from Honduras, we're arguing for a system that can be taken over and the laws can be changed by people who hate God. We want that system. The Christian nationalists want that system. They want a system that is so politically weak it can be taken over by immigrants or people who hate God, and changed and gotten away with, and it can destroy a nation. That's the kind of weak political system that they want to implement. They want this. They want a system that can be taken over by immigrants. And so they're playing this delicate, this game there where they're trying to balance, trying to have their cake and eat it too. We don't want the immigrants to take over, but we want a system that if the immigrants get in, they'll take it over. But we don't want the immigrants in here. But that's how pathetic the system that they're arguing for is. If the immigrants, they want a system that where the immigrants, if they grab onto the offices, the political places of power, this kind of thing, that they can take over and change a nation. God's law doesn't allow that when you implement it. God's system never allows for that. You can have all the immigrants in the world. They can't change the law. There's no legislative body where people come together and say, okay, let's get rid of this law. Let's do this and all that kind of stuff. Like there's nothing in God's law that implements that. But that's what Christian nationalism wants. They want a system where people can change the law. And so this automatically produces a fear that if we get the wrong people in this country, the laws will be changed. And Christian nationalism, instead of looking at God's law and saying, this is superior, this political system is superior to what we have now, and our immigration problem would be solved if we implemented and were faithful with God's law, the weightier matters of which are justice, mercy, and faithfulness. If we implemented God's law, our immigration problem would go away. But no, they're not saying that. They're saying, well, we need to get rid of the immigrants so that we can have peace and order around here. And they're arguing, let's do evil that good may come. Let's punish the innocent with the guilty, because you heard Joel Webben right there saying, a lot of people have to go back, even though they did nothing wrong. They did nothing wrong. They just didn't report to the state. They didn't ask the state if they could come in. That's not wrong. You're not sinning. You're not sinning if you don't go to the state when you go to a new country and say, "Can I live here?" Okay, you're not doing anything wrong. God's not going to judge you. It's okay. Just let's get that out there. The Lord's not judging you by man-made law. Okay. You don't have to report yourself to the baby murderers to ask them where to live. Okay? That's never a thing in God's law. Never. Okay? God's law is primary judicial, and there is no responsibility for the sojourner to go report himself to the magistrate and say, "Can I do business here? Can I live here?" There's nothing like that in God's system. But the Christian nationalists are arguing for that system, and to get what they're doing, as Joel Evans said earlier, we need more prisons. We need more control of the state on the nation and who's allowed in here. We need to give them more control. We need to lose more of our freedoms. And this is what I keep saying. Christian nationalism, like their talking points aren't liberty. It's not freedom. That's not their talking points. They don't use those words. They're like, we need less freedom. We need to give more control of the state over. We need to lose more of our freedoms so that we can have peace. We need to surrender our freedoms. They don't use the word like freedom and liberty. That's not their talking points. You read through their material. It's not about liberty and prosperity and freedom. It's about control, and it's about being around people who look like you. And so we can have order and peace. And the magistrate coming into your life and telling you how to live. And the combining of the magistrate and the state into one entity. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to undo all the good work of what happened in the American War for Independence. The America was established and founded on the rejection of what the Christian nationalists are arguing for. They rejected what the Christian nationalists want, which is George III, the Christian prince ordering the lives of everybody who lives here. Christian nationalism is such a contradictory system. America was born out of a rejection of what these people are arguing for, and they're like, we need to go back to the principles of our father. Our heritage was not America born rejecting the heritage of their fathers. They rejected the customs and the laws of England. Those were their fathers. These were their relatives. And I submit to you, Joel Webben would have been a loyalist. He would have been telling the people, hey, it's the Christian prince. You don't like him, but hey, he's the Christian prince. He's as Wolf calls him, he's the new vicar. He's the vicar of a divine civil rule. And everything he's doing, since he took an oath as a Christian prince, to be the Christian prince, everything he's doing is for order. And you dumb Americans, you care about prosperity. You care about freedom and liberty. You should be submitting yourself to the Christian prince, George III, because he's the Christian prince and he's doing everything he is in the name of order, because you guys are unruly. You guys are rioting. You Lexington and Concord, you're killing people. So we got a quarter troops. These guys would have been loyalists because they keep talking about the heritage of our fathers, where we came from. And you can't get America and believe what these Christian nationalists are arguing for at the same time. The Americans rejected what the Christian nationalists are arguing for. They rejected Wolf's premise that we need to have a Christian prince ordering our lives specifically down to where the pulpit is placed in your church. They rejected that. And they said, no. And I don't care if you're my father, my uncle, my nephew, my brother, my son. I don't care what ties I have to you. We're going to go off and we're going to do our own thing. We're rejecting our heritage. America was a rejection of its heritage, of where it came from. They came from England, the majority of them. And those people rejected the king. They rejected the political system. They rejected the Christian prince. How dare they? And another thing too is, people always talking about, we need to go back to, the heritage of our fathers. And, America was a Protestant, with the Protestant ideals, and I agree with them. But in the founding of this country, they did not establish an immigration policy. There's no immigration policy. Why didn't the Protestants, if we're going to be all Protestant and white again, why didn't they establish an immigration policy for the first 100 years? Page Act, 1875, first immigration policy officially. Why did it take 100 years? Why didn't the Protestants, these wise people who wanted, Protestant culture, why didn't they see fit to establish an immigration policy? So don't tell me about going back to the ideals of our founding fathers if you want an immigration policy, because they didn't have one. This makes no sense to me. Christian nationalism is all about heritage, all about the founding fathers, all about where we came from as a Protestant nation, until you get to the immigration thing. They're like, forget about all that. No, we need people at the border. We need papers. Give me your papers, please. And another thing too, they keep talking about the post-war consensus. Passports were a direct result of the post-war consensus. They came out of the post-war consensus. We weren't asking for passports around here till the 40s. This is a statist and socialist thing. But the Christian nationalists, they love passports. They want more. They want everyone to have a passport. They want papers, please. They want social security numbers. They want everyone in here. They want the state to have eyes on everyone. That's what the Christian nationalists want. And I don't know what that has to do with the heritage of our founding fathers. I have no idea what that has to do with that. That is completely contrary to that. But America was born out of the rejection of what these people are arguing for. And my sister sent me a text. I was talking with her about this. And the Christian nationalists are starting to, laughably, they're starting to now question and attack the Constitution. The Constitution allows this is a quote from a tweet, 188,000 views by Oilfield Rando. The Constitution allows a Democrat president to bring in 15 million illegals in 4 years. The Constitution allows a Republican president to feasibly deport fewer than 1 million illegals in 4 years. Conservatives have no answer for this dilemma. And then whoever shared this, Uncaged the Lion, shared this tweet. At the bottom added, monarchy intensifies. Let me see here if I can find this here. I'll bring this up on the screen here. Yeah, here it is. Yep. Okay. There it is on the screen. So at the bottom there, you'll see monarchy intensifies. I thought we were all about the heritage of our forefathers. The forefathers worked very hard, took great pains, sacrificed their lives to reject the monarchy, and now the Christian nationalists are all about the heritage of our fathers are now saying, let's go back and do the monarchy again. These people have no idea what they're doing. They are fools who don't know the scriptures. They don't know the law of God. They don't know their history. They don't know how to look at history through the Bible and say, okay, this was a good idea, this was a bad idea, because God's law says X, Y, and Z. They don't know what they're doing. They are running amok now. It's chaos with the Christian nationalists. They are chaotic. Because now they're saying, let's go back and do the monarchy again. And by the way, it's all about the heritage of our forefathers, which rejected the monarchy. They rejected the idea of the Christian prince. And they fought a bloody war over it. But the Christian nationalists are like, let's do all that again. And anyone who disagrees with their forefathers and their heritage is a traitor. These guys are idiots. These guys are complete idiots. They have no idea what they're doing. They have no idea what they're saying. I don't know what kind of echo chamber these people live in. But America was a result of the rejection of what the Christian nationalists are now proposing, and they're nickel and diming everybody who disagrees with the founding of America. What are we doing here, man? What are we doing? Don't you know your history? That America rejected everything you're asking for here? These people. Knuckleheads. Let's keep going with what Joe Whitman is saying here.
I'm praying that you get it. And for Ninja 5150, I assume that you're probably a citizen by this point. Praise God. But in terms of moving forward, there's always going to be a million exceptions. And that's part of the problem with Western civilization is every time we talk about a law, we talk about a principle, immediately what's talked about, what gets the spotlight in that conversation and ultimately becomes the case study that sets the law and the procedures is always the exception. The footnote always is elevated to the headline, and then the headline is relegated to the footnote. With every single law, we immediately, if you're talking about sodomy laws, immediately it's like, yeah, but what about the friendly gay couple that that does this and does that, or if you're talking about blasphemy laws, blue laws, Sabbatarian laws, it's like, yeah, but what about this obscure example of so and so, who for whatever reason, the only way that he can make a living is if he works 7 days a week. Look, we've done that. We've done that for 80 years. For 80 years, we have conceptualized and hypothesized the exception. And by doing so, what we have done is no child left behind. We've done it in our education system, in our schools, in our laws, in our economy, at every single level. We have elevated the exception at the expense of the norm. And the cost of that is that the American people as a whole has suffered. That's what we've done. And we have traded in American excellence in order to bring ourselves down, lower ourselves to the lowest common denominator. The entire West has done that. Every European nation, America, Canada, we've all done that, and we've done it for just about a century now. At least 50 years, arguably 80, arguably longer. We have to stop doing that. So
The frustrations of the Christian nationalists are often, or maybe even always, legitimate frustrations. Even with the problem with the immigrants, they're right. There are many immigrants that are working to destroy this nation. Agreed. Got it. And what Joel Webbins here said is true, that America we can't debase ourselves enough as a nation and be sorry for existence and lower ourselves to the lowest common denominator.
So I love you, brother in Christ. Personally, I'm glad you're here.
But their answers are always contradictory, asinine, or anti-biblical.
If you lived here, I would want you to come be a member in our church. We would treat you with fairness and love, just like we do all of the members of our church. But if I was in charge, and as I use my platform to try to influence policy and culture and politics outside of myself and with our nation as a whole, I am going to advocate that immigration, illegal immigration, is immediately stopped. Legal immigration is drastically mitigated.
How are you going to stop illegal immigration? How? America is too big. It's just too big. I mean, Christian nationalists are always nickel and diming the theonomists. You're not practical. But these people are like, hey, let's stop illegal immigration. That is completely ridiculous. You're not going to stop it. That is a fool's errand. There's no way that you're going to stop illegal immigration. It's just there's not enough conviction in the world to fight this war, to stop people from coming into your nation when you're killing your own people in the nation. It's a fool's errand. You really think that you're going to stop illegal immigration? Really? Like no one else has tried that? America is just too big. You're not going to stop illegal immigration. It's never going to happen. The Bible doesn't recognize illegal immigration as a crime. It just doesn't. There's no punishment for it. There's no example of it. The assembly is not a 1-for-1 ratio. And just a word on the assembly. My friend Matt Ware was preaching a sermon this morning, and he went to he was talking about 1 Thessalonians 1. He's doing a series on 1 Thessalonians, which I am excited for. Okay. So this is Blue Letter Bible. And he points out something that is very interesting. Paul and Silvanus and Timotheus unto the church of the Thessalonians. All right. And so he talks about the term church, right? And it's ecclesia, right? Every good Reformed Christian should be familiar with that term, ecclesia. But he also said the term is more than just called out ones. It means assembly. Okay. Outline of biblical usage. A gathering of citizens called out from their homes in a public place. An assembly. That's the first definition of the word. An assembly of the people convened in the public place of the council for the purpose of deliberation. The assembly of the Israelites. Any gathering or throng of men assembled by chance, tumultuously, in a Christian sense. Right, that's what it means. Once the Christian nationalists connect the word ecclesia and their immigration policies, they haven't done it yet, but once they do, they're going to start saying, hey, you know what? We got to keep the immigrants out of church now. Because look, we're already using the assembly in a 1-to-1 ratio of citizenship, right? Now we have to apply it to the term ecclesia because the ecclesia means assembly. That's what it means. So now we have to put conditions on coming to church. Now we need to vet everyone who walks through the church doors to make sure that they're allowed to come in here. Because the Bible says, the law of God says, a third generation, now allowed in the assembly. And the term being used in the New Testament is assembly, right? This is to the assembly. And once the Christian nationalists make the connection, which they will, now we have to start putting conditions on who attends church and who's allowed in church. And we're allowed to keep people out of the nation because we're allowed to keep people out of the church. Now we got to start barring people from even walking through the door. You're not allowed in. You're not allowed to enter the assembly. You're not allowed to enter the assembly to the third generation, to the 10th generation. Not allowed in. That means, once the Christian nationalists get a hold of this, that we got to kick the immigrants out. We have to. If we're going to be consistent. I'm calling it right now. Once the Christian nationalists make the connection that the term ecclesia means assembly, that's what they're going to start doing. That it's now wrong for you to allow immigrants into your church. Because look, it means assembly. And we got to keep people out of the assembly. These people are chaotic.
And then for those who are able to legally immigrate, I want them to be Christian. I want them to love America.
Okay, so that's his...
love our heritage.
Let me pause it at a better, more flattering a picture of Mr. Webb in there. So he says, I want them to be Christian. Now that is a very stupid thing to say. I'm, with respect to Joe Webb, he's not a stupid man. He's a very smart man. But that's a stupid thing to say. I want them, people coming in and being citizens, I want them to be Christian. Just play it out. You want the state to be in charge of defining who's a Christian. Play it out. I'm an immigrant. I come in and let's say I'm a third generation Christian, right? I'm a third generation Christian. And I say, well, I want to come in. I want to be so let me just make sure that I'm quoting this correctly here. He's talking about citizenship.
Who are able to legally immigrate, I want them to be Christian. I want them to
Okay, so legally immigrate. We're not even talking about citizenship here. Legally immigrate. We're not talking about citizenship. Forget about citizenship. This is immigrate. To even come into the country and live here, you have to be a Christian. I want to be Christian, okay? Stupid thing to say, and here's why. Let's play it out. I'm an immigrant. I'm from Canada. Similar accent and everything. And then the state comes and says, are you a Christian? And I say, yes. Okay, come on in. Is that how this goes down? Okay. We're not that dumb. Okay? You can't just give a verbal, yes, I'm a Christian and I love America. Okay, you can come in. That's all I needed. That's all I was looking for. No. The state can't allow that. You can't just take a 5-second testimony of a man to say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, I love America. How is the state going to verify that this person is a Christian and loves America? How can the state verify that? How could you possibly verify that? And why are we making people who come in here do that? Why aren't we making the citizens do that? You got to be Christian. You got to love America if you want to live here. What if you grow up in a scenario and suddenly you're not a Christian anymore and you don't love America? Are we allowed to kick these people out? Are we now kicking people who don't qualify as of whatever the definition of Christian is of the day? Because once you hand over the state, okay, it's your job now to define what's a Christian and who loves America. That's your responsibility. They're gonna take that. They're gonna run with it. Oh man, they want that power so bad. Yes, they do. Oh, if they could only have that power to define who's a Christian and who's not. Can you imagine if we handed the state that power? Here you go. You're in charge of defining who's a Christian and who loves America. Oh, I mean, they are just licking their chops. Oh, if they could have that power right now. Oh man, what great things they would do if we could just put two hands on that ability, on that authority. So no, an immigrant coming in, just play it out. The state can't just take their word. They're going to need testimony. But wait a second. How do you know the people testifying are legitimately saying that this man is a Christian? They could be lying too, right? Every charge must be established on 2 or 3 witnesses. Any schmuck can find 2 or 3 liars and say, yeah, he's a Christian. Yeah, of course he's a Christian. Now we have to vet the people testifying. We have to vet the 2 or 3 witnesses. After vetting this guy, asking him very tough and serious questions, trying to get him to contradict himself, which always goes well. No one's ever been prosecuted or persecuted that way. But that's not going to be good enough, because one sitting is not good enough to define who's a Christian and who's not. No, we need this guy to be on probation. You got to report to the state for the next couple of years. Okay? And since we don't trust you, we can't have you just telling us. No, we need the state agents to be watching you. Because being a Christian is something that cannot be established after just even a week. We all know this. There's many people in our churches. They say, I'm a Christian, and in a couple of weeks they can convince you they're a Christian. No, we need the state to be in your house. That's where this is going. You can't avoid it. We need the state to be in your house. We need a government agent living with you, a state-approved, vetted government agent who the people pay for through extorted taxation, to live with you, to make sure that you're being serious about that. A, you are a Christian, and B, you love America. That's the only way to prove it. That's the only way to prove it. Because you're going to start off with, okay, yeah, it sounds good. Yeah, only Christians and people who love America. What is it? That definition of Christian and love America is going to change over time. Because the liberals, they grab onto that, what it means to be a Christian. They have a definition of what it means to be a Christian. If you've ever been on the streets, they'll tell you that it's not Christian to tell people to repent of their sins. And secondly, to love America is to burn it to the ground and start over. That's what the liberal definition of it is. And there is no way that people like Webben and the Christian Nationalists can guarantee that these pagans and these frauds will not get into positions of power and start changing the definition, which is exactly what has happened through America. We used to have requirements to be in positions of political authority. You used to have to be a Christian. And then they used those same positions to, let's get away with those requirements. Okay, all right, go on. All right, now you can be a pagan. Now you can swear on a stack of pornography that you're going to be faithful to the Constitution. Oh, but that's not going to happen in our Christian nation. Yeah, it is. Yes, it is. You can't outsmart Satan with your political maneuvering. You can't do it. This is a stupid thing to say, to be like, yeah, let's put the state in charge of defining who's a Christian and who loves America. That's a stupid thing to say. Anyone who says that is saying a stupid thing. That is completely antithetical to Christian freedom and Christian liberty and God's law. Giving the state the responsibility to define who's a Christian and who loves America. It's completely asinine. The Christian Nationalists are just, they don't care about being biblical. They just care about being anti-liberal. Whatever the liberals say, we're just going to say the opposite. That is my contention with Christian nationalism. They're not pro-Bible. They're just anti-liberal. And if the liberals didn't exist, I submit to you the Christian nationalists wouldn't exist. Or they would exist. They would just pick some sort of enemy out there in the ether, and then they would to get their identity by being not them. I'm going to move on to Mr. Isker now. And this is Jesus and Politics 5, conference number 3, Andrew Isker, October 19th, 2024, How to Defeat Trash World, right? And he's going to start talking about, belonging. In his talk is Jesus and Politics. I listened to the talk. Very little about Jesus, almost nothing about Jesus, of course. Almost nothing about God's law. Most of it is just about being around your people, and we need to have people who think like us in this country, and things like that. But very little about Christ, and the politics. Is a lot of talk, more talk about Greco-Roman politics, which is standard fare for the Christian nationalists. Which also another point is, if you look at the Roman, for some reason the Christian nationalists love classical liberalism, which came out of Rome, right? Primarily was a Roman, Greco-Roman. It's a focus on those teachings that came out of Greece and Rome. But if you look at how Rome did their citizenship policy, the Christian nationalists would be horrified to find out how Rome did their citizenship policy. Almost anyone could become a citizen if you did the right thing. There's many avenues to becoming a citizen in Rome, and which a Christian nationalist would be horrified by. It's another antithetical, contradictory thing. Oh yeah, classical liberalism. But if you look at the actual laws of Rome, the Christian nationalists would be horrified to find out how easy it was to become a citizen of Rome. But yeah, in this talk, there's talk about Aquinas, Aristotle, very little, almost nothing about Moses, which is standard fare for the Christian nationalists. So he starts talking about small towns and urban societies and cities and things like that. And let's let the man give us some context here.
Unlike Tim Bouchon, he can. Right, he's not one of us, right? And even my mom, right? My mom grew up in a small town, an hour away from ours, and she's lived there for 40 years, and her entire life, she'll say today, I just don't feel like I'm a Wasican, right? I'm not one of you. I'm a foreigner, right? Even though, right, she's just as German and Scandinavian as everyone else, right? Speaks the same way, talks the same way, says "ope" when she bumps into people. Right, but she's not one of us, of Wasicans, right? She doesn't feel that way, and for many of the communities, that's the way it is. Everyone has come from somewhere else. They're living there because it's a nice place to live, but they don't have roots, right? Where we live about a 5-minute walk from the cemetery where all of my relatives are buried, and there's 6 generations of Iskers buried in that cemetery, Woodville Cemetery, about a mile from our house. Right, we have roots in this place. Right, that's why it's very painful to leave it. We have roots here, but most people don't have roots like that, or if they do, they despise them. They don't like them. They're itching to leave, and so our communities are not places where people have this same shared way of life, right? The same history, right? I can look at buildings in the town that were owned by my great-grandfather, and you feel a sense of pride in that. My great-grandpa owned that building, right? He owned that big, beautiful brick warehouse. That was our family's, right? I can drive down the road and see where they lived. Right, I knew this place. In this deep way. People don't have that any longer. We don't have the same history. We don't have the same sense of place. We don't have the same purpose and pride for our place. Right, these places, they're just merely a geographic location where you just happen to live at the moment. Right, you got a good interest rate and you bought some property. And here you are, right? That's how people think of home today. Right? To have this kind of local autonomy that you would find in the Bible, right? The kind that Althusius describes in his Politics, right? The kind that the Althusian federal system is based on, right? You just can't have a random collection of human beings, right? A community like that has no authority, no autonomy. And so you can see why it's very, very easy for the federal government to say, all right, if you want this highway money, or if you want this money for your school, you're going to do what we say, right? It's easy for their authority, their local autonomy, to be eroded because the basis of it, right, the unity of the people, the shared purpose, right, the collective identity of that community, that is gone. So who cares, right? We just want the grant. Right? We just want the money. And so finally, right, this is where we'll spend a good deal of time, right? The last one, right? The very last one for Althusius is the empire, and we won't.
Okay, so he's talking about Althusius there. Just a word on this. Again, Christian nationalism, it's just they don't see down the road of where they're going. They're just looking back and celebrating what they're leaving, but they don't know where they're going. They're not concerned in their boat about where they're going. They're just concerned about what they're getting away from. And no one is asking the question, hey, we're heading for some rocks here. Maybe we should look where we're going. And the leaders of the boat are like, no, don't worry about that. The best way for us to find out where we're going is to leave where we came from. That just seems to be their emphasis. Like, let's do something stupid first, and then we'll worry about doing the right thing. We can't do the right thing until we do something stupid first, like getting rid of all the immigrants. That's just it's a stupid thing, and that's their seems to be their foundation. They keep bringing it up over and over again. Mass deportations, just a silly and stupid thing. Again, this is an anti-American thing to say. Founding fathers never pushed for that. But do you see where this talk is going if we apply consistently? Christian nationalism is heading towards tribalism, right? They can't stop tribalism, just like they can't stop the racism that's entering into their ranks. They can't stop it. They don't know what to do with Corey Mallard. They can't stop him. They've got no political or epistemological bulwark to deal with Corey Mallard. They're completely exposed to Corey Mallard and Stone Choir. They're completely exposed. They set themselves up for the black arrow of Corey Mallard to penetrate whatever armor they think they have through their underbelly. They've got nothing to stop him with because they've rejected the scripture as the ultimate authority on justice, mercy, and faithfulness. They've rejected it. We've got to go with Rome. We've got to go with Althusius. We've got to go with the reformers. We've got to go with them. We can't use the Bible to judge these people because we have to do with tradition first. We've got to go with tradition. And whether the reformers are right or wrong, it's irrelevant. They're the reformers. We got to go with them. And we can't put them under the lens of the law of God because that's anti-traditional. And we got to be traditional. But they're heading towards tribalism. And you see him start already bringing this up that, his mom is all like, even though I speak the same language and I've been here for 40 years, I don't feel like one of you. And the practical application that the Christian nationalists don't realize where they're going with this is you cannot marry outside of your small town. You can't. Because you're betraying your heritage. You're bringing in somebody who's not one of us. That's where this is going. You can't stop that. When the people come in who are more vocal than Mr. Isker, who are more Christian nationalists than he is, he's not going to be like, well, hold on a second now. Hold on. You can't say that. And they're going to say, like, why? You just said your own mom doesn't feel like one of us, even though she's been here for 40 years, speaks the same language, is basically one of us, but doesn't feel like one of us. And we've got to respect our fathers. Look, there's 5-6 generations of Iskers buried here. How do you think we got all the good things we did? Because the people around here stuck around here. And if you bring in a foreigner and they start living here, they're going to mess with the mojo of this small town. So no, you can't marry someone outside of your small town, because right now they're saying they're completely exposed to mixed race marriages. You can't do it because you're betraying your forefathers. You're betraying your heritage, and we got to preserve the heritage. To preserve the heritage means we can't have mixed marriages. You can't marry someone outside of the country. Yeah, biblically it's okay, but I frown on it. That's where they're kind of at right now. But it doesn't stop there. They don't realize that they can't stop this descent into tribalism. There's no cutoff point. Because as soon as, let's say they get their way, as soon as they get their way of, okay, Americans now frown on marrying someone who's not American, then it's going to descend to, now you can't marry someone outside of the state. And then from there, now you can't marry someone outside of your county. And then from there, it's now you can't marry someone outside of your small town, wherever it is you're from. You can't, because it's a different person. It's a foreigner, right? Foreigner, the definition of foreigner with the Christian nationalists is not going to stop with somebody who's outside of the country. It's going to extend from somebody who's just a couple miles away from me. It's going to keep on going all the way down to you can't marry outside of this small group right here. And you can't move to a different area because that's a betrayal of the heritage. There's 5 generations of Iskers buried here, and you moving to a different part of the country means that you're going to be buried out there, and now you're betraying the small town. Look at the sacrifice of these generations. You need to stay here. And you can't bring a woman from a different country, a different part, because she's a foreigner. Now, I don't think Andrew Isker is saying this at all. I don't think he's saying this at all. I don't think he would ever subscribe to this. But my question for the Christian nationalists is, what kind of bulwark do you have in place when the people who are more faithful to their heritage than you are come along and say the things I'm saying right now? What are you going to say? Can't appeal to God's law. God's law doesn't punish mixed racial marriages. God's law doesn't punish illegal immigration. Right? We've rejected that standard, and we're on to whatever standard is we've made up now. Whatever standard is handy for us. What are you going to do when someone who loves their generation, loves their heritage, loves their small town more than you comes along and says, you know what? I'm more faithful to my heritage than you, and I'm going to set up a society and a culture and laws, since now that the small town and community is now in control of the laws. Whoever's born here is not allowed to marry outside of here. What are you going to do when they come along and say that? Get a hold of the small town legislature. You've got the Christian nationalism has got nothing to say about that. They don't know what to do when someone comes along who loves and is more Christian nationalist than they are. That's where this is heading. It's heading towards tribalism. If you look at Africa, people speak the same language. They look exactly the same. They have the same customs. But they will absolutely fight each other to the death, and there will be problems if you marry not outside your race, not outside your religion, not outside your outside of your ethnicity, but outside your tribe. Outside of your tribe, where the differences are like, are you kidding me? Petty differences, but they will go to war. There will be problems if you marry outside of your tribe. Look at the Hutus and the Tutsis and the Rwanda massacre. Are you kidding me? The differences between you and the brown people is not going to stop once you kick out all the brown people. You're going to find other differences with your neighbor. Because once you reject God's law as a standard of justice, which the Christian nationalists have done, they have officially rejected it. God's law is a principle. It's an idea among many. Yeah, Moses has got some tips and tricks. Althusius, now that's where it's at. He had the right idea. And Aquinas and all these guys. Once you reject God's law, you've rejected the idea of loving your neighbor as yourself. Because Christ ties loving your neighbor to yourself and loving God to his law. To his law. No other political system knows how to teach its people how to love their neighbor and allows them to love their neighbor. None. All of the political systems, including the Christian nationalist political system, breeds hatred of their neighbor. Hatred of their neighbor. And the Christian nationalists doesn't seem to be a problem with them. Like, yeah, well, God's law, tips and tricks. God's law is an internet article, clickbait. 7 great ways to make your nation prosperous and godly. That's how they view God's law. It's not authoritative. God's law is a principle, and their principles are laws. That's Christian nationalism. But the direction it's headed in, they are more concerned with what they're going away from rather than what they're going to. And they do not see that this ship is headed for some huge rocks that's going to destroy the whole thing. Now, these are harsh words I have for the Christian nationalists. I have no faith in what they're doing. I think the Overton window, as said before, is just get our guy in office. You know, Christian nationalists are all about Trump, and now they seem to be turning on him, and he's turning on them because he keeps on proving himself to be somewhat of a Zionist. He can't really stop, their arch enemies, the Jews. So, but any system that rejects God's law as the standard and the guiding principle or law, and as the ideal, God's law is the ideal. For them, God's law is not the ideal. Tradition's the ideal. Pick some sort of traditional law system, classical liberalism. That's the ideal, not God's law. It's not. They don't care about God's law. Whatever. They don't appeal to it. They barely even know it. And they'd sooner quote Aquinas or Aristotle than they would Moses. But Christian nationalism is just, with every day, it's becoming more and more of a disaster of a testimony of true Christian principles, true Christian law. It's so bizarre to me that Christians used to be known as the people of the book. And the Christian nationalists can't get away from that book fast enough. And they're all about heritage. Yeah, our heritage is the Bible. That's our heritage. It's the Bible. It's God's law. It's the Puritans. That's our heritage. And they can't reject them fast enough. They can't reject our heritage book fast enough. They want to get rid of it. They don't quote it. They don't know it. Stephen Wolf's questions regarding non-legislative theonomy a couple months ago, he didn't even know what God's law says. I don't even think he reads the Bible. Let me take that back. I do believe he reads the Bible, but I don't think it's obvious from that video he doesn't know how God's law works. He's making he's writing political books. He's a political authority. He's a philosophical authority, and he doesn't even know how God's system works. That's Christian nationalism for you. Going everywhere except the Bible for answers to our political problems. Well, folks, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for listening to the Think and Reform podcast. And as always, my friends, I encourage you to think and reform.